Hello there. In this video I'm going to show you how you can use Fluid Designer for 3D printing to create bracelets. If you want the software Fluid Designer for 3D printing, if you just go to fluiddesigner.co.uk and go to our downloads page, you can actually download the basic software completely free of charge. Fluid Designer is based upon Blender and microvellum technology, and they're open source, so you can download the basic software for free. In this video, however, we're going to show you some objects that we've created for Fluid Designer which enable you to make bracelets quickly and easily just by dragging and dropping almost. And these are some of the objects here that are available, but these objects you will have to actually purchase. So if we start off, first of all, if we look at a basic object, so if we just drag and drop that one onto the workspace, what we've got here is a basic pendant. Sorry, not pendant, bracelets we're doing here. If we look in this panel here, we can see that the default inner diameter is 65 millimeters for this bracelet, but we can set other diameters up to 95 millimeters in this panel. Not going to change it in this particular video. But what I am going to do is I'm going to show you how you can change the thickness and the height of the bracelet. So in the panel on the right hand side here, we can see at the moment that the object we've currently got highlighted is 1 millimeter thick and 5 millimeters high. So in other words, this thickness is 1, that's the thickness of the bracelet. The height of the bracelet is 5 millimeters. Well, we can change that quite easily. So we can have a 10 millimeter high bracelet, or we could go mad and have a 25 millimeter high bracelet. And we can also change the thickness of the bracelet. So we can have a wall thickness of 1.5 or 2. So if I change it to 2 by 10, for example, that gives me a bracelet that's 2 millimeters thick and a height of 10 millimeters. So you can see we can very quickly and easily change the bracelet dimensions here in this panel. We can also add a pattern to the outside of the bracelet here, and we can also edit this pattern, which you may have seen in some of our other videos. I'm not actually going to do that in this instance. So that's just a very simple, plain bracelet that can be created. Now if I go to the startup screen again, I'm going to now scroll down, and a lot of these objects are very similar in the way that they actually work, and I'm going to choose a particular style down here. I'm going to choose this Enepa curve bracelet and just drag and drop that onto the workspace. And if you look at this object, you can see it's not quite complete at the moment. But what have we got? Well, again, if we look in the panel on the left, the default bracelet size is 65 millimeters. That's the inner diameter. But we can change that. That's not a problem. And if we look in the right-hand panel, at the moment, the cross-section of this is 1 millimeter. So it's a rounded cross-section in this case. And again, we can change that. So I could do a cross-section of 3 by 1, for example. So that gives me a depth here of 3 millimeters. So the bracelet itself will be 3 millimeters thick. And it gives me a thickness here of 1 millimeter. So again, there are some options here. So I can change it to 1.5 millimeters circular cross-section. So every time you do that, you change the appearance of the bracelet, but of course you change the volume of material, the amount of silver you would need to get this bracelet made, and that does affect the price. So you do need to consider that, and you also need to consider how strong the bracelet's going to be as well. But I'm going to stick to cross-section diameter of 1 because it does look quite nice on my screen. Let's see, how can we finish this bracelet off? Well, if we go to this option here, you can see that there's this count value of 10. Well, if I take that back down to 1, we get down to 1 object. So my Enepa curve bracelet is in fact made up of repeated versions of this. And all I'm doing is replicating it around a circle, which in this case has got a diameter of 65 millimeters. So to complete the bracelet, all I need to do is to just keep adding to the count here until the bracelet is made up. Now, one of the things that does happen with bracelets is that you do have to look at the pattern where the object overlaps and decide, do you want to keep that pattern or do you want to modify it slightly? And you can modify it by changing the relative offset value here. And as you can see, as I do that, it does change the pattern all the way around the bracelet, and it means you have to change the count as well. So we could do it like that. If you're happy with the pattern, if there is no strange pattern where it overlaps, in fact that looks okay, then you can leave it at that. We could actually do a count of 18 and change this offset. If we try and change it to 0.7, that's not quite joining yet. 0.8 takes it a bit too far, so I could end up typing something like 0.76 in there, and I have to type it this time, and I could keep playing around with this until I get the pattern that I want. So I'm not quite sure what the value is I need. I'll stick to that at the moment. It's not perfect, but it'll do for the moment. It does take a bit of time playing around with these numbers to get a perfect pattern here. So there's our bracelet in terms of being completed circularly. It is also possible to add an extra row to the bracelet, and you can modify the pattern by adjusting the relative offset here as well. Increasing this value will change the pattern. You do need to be careful, however, about creating too many of these objects, because there are limitations on the number of faces you can have printed for an object like this at the moment. If you have it printed on the internet, you are restricted. But you know, you just have to play around and see what you end up with. There are ways around that. Now, if I decided I wanted a different inner diameter, at the moment this is set to 65 millimeters, I could change it here, set the bracelet size. So I could set an inner diameter instead of 65, which is what it is at the moment. I could change it to say 80 millimeters. And of course, when you do that, the bracelet opens up and you need to add in more columns, more of the pattern to fill it in again. Okay, so that's what happens if you change the bracelet size. So I changed the size from the default size of 65 millimeters, I changed it to 80 millimeters. But as you can see, this can all be done from the menu system. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the count back to 1, and I'm actually going to let me see, I'm going to delete that connection for the bracelet there. I'm just going to go back to the basic pattern itself, this ENIPA pattern, and I'm also going to delete the cross section of it. So what I've done is I've stripped this back to the bare bones of the ENIPA curve itself. Now this won't print because it's got no depth to it, but I'm going to use this object in a slightly different way here. I'm going to put it into another bracelet. So I've got to be a bit careful here. What I need to do is to go to File and Save As, and I'm going to save this to the desktop, and instead of saving it as an ENIPA curve bracelet, I'm going to save it with the name curve stuck at the end of it. So I'm just going to save that to the desktop. So I've stripped back my object to just a curve. Now if I just go to File and New, all of these objects that are shown here can be stripped back in the same way as I've just shown you. And the beauty about them is that what we can then do is, if I take you to this object up near the top here, which is another example of a bracelet that we can create with Fluid Designer for 3D printing, you see that this bracelet's made up at the moment of 4 circular rings. And again, it's wrapped around a 65 millimeter inner diameter. And there are also these patterns around the outside. Well, what can I do with these patterns? Well, if I view it from the front first of all, if I just set my count back down to 1, so I'm just stripping away the 3/4 of the bracelet, because I just want to work with this object at the moment, because the other 3 are just replicas of this. If I press the Tab key and go and view it from the front, What I can do here is I can actually create a pattern by dragging and dropping by dragging and dropping some of these objects here, and it's not that easy this, because I do need to hide that out of the way. And if I just drag that object down to the middle there, and I'll just choose another one here and drag it over there, and I'll just drag that one into the middle as well. So I've just basically dragged 3 curves into the center of my screen, and if I just join them together, and then if I just switch back on my pattern and just go into edit mode again, you'll see that the square, the circle and the line now fit inside of this circle. Now what this means is that I can join them to it and create a pattern inside this circle, but I do need to be a little bit careful here. I need to go to view and top first of all, and I just need to move these curves up 1 millimeter. I just need to line them up. I know this because I need to line it up with my bracelet. In fact, it looks to me as though I've moved the bracelet at the same time there. Yes, I did. I didn't intend to do that. My bracelet's actually highlighted. I need to deselect the bracelet, just go back in again and highlight that object and view from the top. And oh no, that's where I want it now. I want it in line with that. I need to do that so that it fits neatly inside of my bracelet here, inside this circle. Excuse me. So if I just highlight this object here now, and if I just join these two together, you'll see that what happens is that the object at the center now has been placed inside this circle of my bracelet, and it's got the same thickness as it. And if I now replicate the count around here, you can see I can create a completed bracelet now, and this will in fact 3D print because it's got a thickness of 1 millimeter here and a depth of 2 millimeters. And again, you know, like we've shown you with the other objects, we can change that. Unfortunately, it's all the way down at the bottom here because there's a lot of objects in this particular file. But if I go all the way down to the bottom here, whoops, somewhere down here, yeah, I can change my wall thickness. So I could change it to 2 by 2, for example. So you'll see that makes it 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. Not quite as attractive, so I'll just set it back to the 1 by 2 that was there. You do have to play around with this until you get an appearance that suits you. But you do also have to remember, is it going to be strong enough to print? So that's how I can use these objects around the outside to create a pattern in the middle. But if I just go to File and New again, and if I just open up the empty pattern here and I'll just take the count down to 1 again. Okay, so this is the same bracelets I've just been using there. And if I now go to File and Append and go to my desktop, here's the Enipper curve that I opened up before, that I saved before, that I was working with before. And as you can see, the Enipper curve is not that radically different from these objects around the outside. And so I can do the same sort of thing here, place this Enipper curve inside this circle of my bracelet. But I do need to check that it's the right sort of size first of all. So if I just go to I just need to select that object. If I just go to edit mode, yeah, as you can see, my curve does fit inside this circle fairly well. I've chosen the right sizes here. If it didn't fit, you would have to scale it up, which is not too difficult in Fluid Designer, but it does fit quite nicely. So if I select my Enipper curve now and select my bracelet outline and just join them together, you'll see that it fits. It hasn't fitted quite beautifully. I didn't line it up properly at the back, so I'll just undo that. Something I forgot to do. I did it in the last one, but I forgot to do it this time. If I just view it from the top, I just need to line this up and I just need to line it up with that white line there. Okay, just to overlap with that. That way it will fit in the middle of this curve. So I've just basically lined it up with the other objects that are on this workspace, so that when I actually link it here now, it fits right in the middle of this. It was offset at the back slightly before. So you do just have to make that adjustment when working with this object. And if I just go back and switch on 4 there to the count, so I've now got a bracelet with an N-upper curve inside of this circle, and I've got it replicated 4 times. And there's no reason why we can't do this 3 times, 2 times, 1 time, etc., and with different shapes. And we do in fact have objects with 3 circles around them as well, which can be manipulated in the same way. Okay, so we've shown you a number of different ways in which you can use these patterns to create bracelets. Once you've actually created a bracelet, all you've got to do is go to the internet, and if you go to Shapeways or some other 3D printing company, upload your file. So here's the N-upper curve, for example. Shapeways will run a check on it and tell you what materials it can be printed in. So this bracelet can be printed in plastic. Whoops. Scroll down a bit. Can be printed in this instance in steels, polished gold steel, bronze steel, and it can be printed in silver and brass and in gold as well. Okay, so the finished object would look something like this. Okay, so that's the N-upper curve bracelet, similar in design to the one that we've just shown. Okay, so that's Fluid Designer for 3D printing, how you can create bracelets using the objects that we've created. Okay, thank you.